For thousands of climbers, standing on the summit of Mount Everest is an achievement of a lifetime. At 8,849 meters is the highest point on Earth, but reaching the summit is only half the journey. Most accidents, and most deaths, happen on the way back down. After standing on top of the world, I thought the hardest part was behind me. This season, before climbing Everest, I'd already summited two other 8,000 meter peaks in Nepal, being Annapurna and Makalu. Annapurna is statistically the most dangerous mountain in the world, with a death rate of 1 in 3 climbers. So coming out of Annapurna and then Makalu and then flying to Everest Base Camp, I felt pretty good, but I learnt a lot on those two mountains, which are skills which I took over to Everest. But I was really aware of the risks involved on Everest, especially being that she's at almost 9,000 meters at 8848, and on these 8,000 meter peaks, when things go wrong, they go wrong fast. On the summit of Everest, there's definitely a massive sense of achievement, but you can't stay there long. Snap a few photos, take in the moment, but then you've got to shift your focus, change gears, and start preparing for that descent. The South Summit Ridge is an area near the top of Everest. You're above 8,700 meters, and it's incredibly exposed. Some sections are only about a boot width wide, and so you're clipped into the fixed rope because a trip or a stumble there would be catastrophic, life-ending. On our descent down, we'd already summited, we'd gone through Hillary Step, and we were making our way back down. We just had the South Summit left before starting our drop. My Sherpa Peshembe had said to me, continue on. He had stopped to pick up some oxygen bottles that we had dropped on the way up. At that time is when I first noticed Pemba. There was some climbers in front of me, and it's actually quite a narrow section with a little bit of steep, small climbing, maybe 5 meters. The climbers behind him were being impatient and yelling and screaming. And at that point, I kind of noticed the way that Pemba was moving, and he was unsteady on his feet, moving extremely slowly. We got through that section, the other climbers barged past him, and that's when I caught up to him. I think one of the things I noticed first was that he wasn't clipped into the fixed rope, and in that section right there, that's incredibly dangerous. To our right, there must have been a 2,000 meter drop, so if you go off the edge there, you're done. And on top of that, he was unsteady. He wasn't stable. That's what made me first go, is this guy okay? As I caught up to him, I grabbed him and I was like, are you okay? And then at that point, he kind of just mumbled something. And that's when I quickly realized that this climber was not in a good condition. So I quickly grabbed him and sat him down just to the left where there was a bit more of an embankment. And first thing I did, clipped him into the line to make sure he was safe and I was safe. But he basically mumbled something and then very quickly passed out. So now I have an unconscious climber at 8,744 meters, and we're alone. I think that's when reality hit.
Go on, man.
I knew Peshembe was behind me, but I didn't know if he was 5 minutes behind me or 40 minutes behind me. And considering the chaos of the amount of people that were on the mountain that day, it was very nerve-wracking being alone. So here we are at 8,744 meters alone, and I have an unconscious climber. I think at this point is about when I realized that he was more than just a climber. I had an unconscious Nepali Sherpa with me. On the mountains, it's incredibly hard to tell who's who. By the time we've got our oxygen masks on, our goggles on, our summit suits on with the hoods pulled up, there's no distinguishing features. We all look the same. So we wear these Velcro patches on our chest, which has usually the nationality flag, so for me an Australian, and then our names underneath. His was a Nepali flag and it said Pemba Sherpa. So right there, I realized who we had. I'd never met Pemba before, but his suit was an orange and yellow Pioneer Camp Summit suit, which I knew all the 8K Sherpas were wearing this season. So I figured that he was part of our team, and later on I was to find out that he was part of a scientific expedition taking ice samples high up on the mountain. But here we are. I'm all alone with an unconscious climber. And I think this is where my medical training came in, and along with mountaineering, doing problem solving. Why is he unconscious? Is it just exhaustion or is it something more? So I immediately opened his bag and looked at his oxygen tank. It had 1,500 bar left. So that means about half. So he's still got a lot of oxygen left in his tank. That should be enough for about 3-4 hours of relatively high flow O2. Enough to get him down, or at least most of the way down to Camp 4. So that's not the problem. So what else could it be? Keep going through the line. Hose looked good, then onto the mask. Looking at the mask visually from the outside, all looked fine. So I kept going through anything else. Couldn't find anything else wrong with him. So I went back to the mask, and looking closely, the mask has an exhaust valve basically here under your chin. And that's to, one, when you breathe out, expel all that gas, but then also it's a drainage plug, because at that elevation, the amount of condensation that comes with your breath, it turns into water. And if you actually look at quite a lot of the footage, you'll see on myself and on a lot of the climbers, we have big ice crystals all around here. And that is the water condensation dripping out of your mask and then freezing on your suit. And then looking at that, I could see that his had frozen shut. It was just a giant ice ball. And so what was basically happening was he was breathing out and then breathing in the same air. Basically, he had a plastic bag over his head. So at that point, it's what can you do? I mean, it's not like scuba diving where you can take your mask off, give it to the other person and do like that. You know, we're at 8,744 meters. I've also got to protect myself. So it was, how do I fix his mask? I think around this point, Pashembe had caught up to me as well. So Pashembe was there, and I kind of explained to him the situation of what's going on, and we tried to problem solve it together. We were safe we were safe clipped in, but also we were on a ticking clock. We're at 8,700 meters. We also only have a certain amount of oxygen that we can get down. So it was a race against time. I remember at one point, we definitely, I don't know if it was a conversation or if it was more just a look, but it's like, what can we do for this guy, and how long do we stay here before we have to leave him? And that was tough. We took his mask off, we hit it, we were trying to break this ice free. I always travel with a Petzl flip knife on my harness, as most of us do. They're lightweight, they're extremely sharp, and if you need to cut a line or anything, you've got a knife on you. So at that point, I opened up my knife, pulled it out, and I'm there chiseling, while he's wearing the mask, chiseling the ice away. And every now and then, I'd chisel it, and then a gush of water would flow out of his mask, and you could almost see he'd borderline regained consciousness as he got fresh air from the O2, but then also all that CO2 is gone. And he'd kind of regained consciousness for a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, and then he'd just pass out again. And so as it would refreeze. So we played this game for a little while where I'd managed to break the ice free, and then it would refreeze. And I think one of the biggest moments during that was we'd cleared his mask, he'd opened his eyes, he'd regained consciousness. And then I remember him saying, "I summited Mount Everest," before shortly passing out again. And that moment really hit me and still sticks with me today. I'm getting goosebumps. The risks that we take on, everything to climb these mountains, and how important it is to us and also to the Nepalis. That hit hard. Was I worried about my own oxygen? Absolutely. I think at about that point we were using about 3 liters per minute of O2. An oxygen bottle holds around 1,200 liters of compressed liquid oxygen. So 3 liters per minute, it goes pretty quickly. And this is oxygen that we had planned on using on our descent. So by being delayed with Pemba, I was burning through oxygen, which I didn't have much left for. So at least had the mental capacity at that point to realize this. And when Pashembe finally caught up to us, one of the first things I did was ask him to turn my bottle down to 0.5 liters per minute, which is a nice resting flow rate. That's what we use when we're in camp or you're taking a break. So that saved me time for continued on the descent. Did we ever think about leaving? No. It just wasn't even on the cards. It was, how do we solve this and how do we get Pemba down safely, even if that meant putting our own lives at risk. It was definitely a tough moment, and some conversations were had with myself there, but I mean, by this point we'd already passed a few bodies on the mountain, and some other climbers in distress that were making their way down with a Sherpa team as we were ascending. I didn't want to add another one, so it was, how do we solve this problem and get Pemba and the rest of the team safely down? Once we realized that we couldn't fix his mask, it was, okay, let's move on. And I remembered of another climber that was in the 8K team that was climbing with 2 Sherpas. And I remember thinking, well, if anyone's going to have a spare mask here on the mountain, it's got to be them. So I asked Pashembe to radio up. They were still up at the summit at this point, so they're at least an hour away from where we were. And luckily, Nawang replied, that the other Sherpa, and yes, they did have another mask. It was like, oh, thank God, at least we've now got a plan. But also we knew how far away they were from us. The fact that we would have to spend another hour up at that elevation, and then also how do we keep Pemba alive and conscious for that long? So at that point it basically became clean out his mask and letting him regain consciousness before he'd pass out again. Lots of shaking, slapping, Pemba, Pemba, wake up, stay with me. Lots of that, just trying to keep him conscious and breathing what he could for that time. So remember, we were right on the trail, sitting there, clipped in, and while we were there, probably 30 to 50 climbers passed us, either going up, but most were coming down after their own summit. A few offered assistance, but there wasn't much that anyone else could do. We asked everyone if anyone had a spare mask, but everyone was saying no. A few people offered us extra bottles, but we didn't need bottles. We needed a mask. You also got to remember, at that height, everyone is exhausted. Everyone's at their limit, running on fumes. And so people would have to come off of the line, or we'd have to do this dance where they'd come along the line and then they'd come around, and then we'd quickly unclip them, come past ourselves and clip them back on the line. But for the most part, people wanted to help, which was great, but there was nothing anyone could do. So we just let everyone keep going. Now we're about 90 minutes in, and we're still sitting there, 8,744 meters. Nawang finally arrives. He's got the spare mask. So we quickly undo the hose, put the new mask in, put it over his face. And I mean, the response is amazing. Almost immediately, he regains consciousness. His eyes open. He's not really sure where he is at this point. At least his eyes are open. He's mumbling something incoherent. Maybe it was in Nepali. That was a great sign to see. And from there, it just got better. 2 minutes in, he's a bit more alert. He's now barely stringing stuff together. 3 minutes in, 4 minutes in, he's becoming more and more alert. 5 minutes in, we've got him up and standing. Amazing. That's incredible. By this time, the team with the spare Sherpa showed up. There was a few other Sherpas that had either come up to sort of help the situation. And this is, I mean, it wasn't just 8K Sherpas, it was Sherpas from 7 summits, from Asian trekking, from all the companies were there, and everyone was trying to help. And so it was incredible to see. And at this point, one of the other Sherpas, Nawang, I think it was, grabbed me and said, "Hey Paul, he's one of our Sherpa brothers. You know, we've got this now. You can start to descend." So that's when I, wish Pemba well, and I clip myself to the front of the line, and I slowly start descending down. As I start descending, I'm maybe 10 meters away from them, moving down. And I remember looking back over my shoulder, seeing Pemba on his feet, surrounded by Sherpa brothers, and just the relief that seeing him on his feet and being just overwhelmed with how it could have just gone so wrong, and we were there and able to help. Looking back, Everest was still this incredible climb, this monumental challenge, this goal I've been chasing for so long. But she definitely taught me some lessons. Some other mountains, you go up, you go down, incident-free, nothing happens. It's the ones where it doesn't go perfectly to plan that you learn from. And I think on this one, it's preparation, it's organization, it's just how something so simple like a little non-return valve in a mask can be deadly. And not that this means, I doubt I will still carry spare masks, because it's extra weight that you're carrying, maybe one in a team versus one per climber, but it's just another one of those things. Check your gear, make sure everything is working 100%, because up at those heights, there's no room for mistakes. And I'm just so happy that we were able to be there and make a difference. Unfortunately, that was the last time I saw Pemba as I looked over my shoulder and continued my descent. I know that he did make it down to Camp 4 safely, maybe 2-3 hours behind me. And then from there, he was got rushed down with some Sherpa brothers to Camp 3, Camp 2. And I believe he got evacuated from base camp to recover. But I would love to meet him one day. I did actually try when I was in Kathmandu to meet up with him, but unfortunately it wasn't able to work. Everest reminded me that success isn't just reaching the summit. Success is when you make the right decision and stop and help when sometimes it could have been easier just to keep walking. And I think that is a lesson that I'm going to take with me forever. Be the one that makes a difference.